Quick update, we're at $50 donated. Please make sure to subscribe to help support the shelter that I volunteer at in Seattle. So, after the Baylor game, I got benched for Cole Snyder. I sat on the bench for 6 games waiting to earn the job back. After starting out 1-2 and beating the number 2 team in the nation, our record slipped to 3-5 since I was benched. I'd like to say that I was grinding to get my job back, but really I was more like Alex Moran from Blue Mountain State. I was chilling, just going through the motions and not taking being the backup quarterback too seriously. So when Coach Dempsey inserted me into the starting lineup for a snow game at home versus a 6-2 Ohio team, I didn't get any sleep Friday night before the game. I got my roommate to give me some of his Adderall so I could stay locked in studying Ohio's defense and their star corners Torrey Cox Jr. and Chris Atkinson. Especially with this weather and the wind, my passes were floating like crazy. I just didn't have the required arm talent to win this game through the air, but I had several mental lapses trying to pass the ball instead of just tucking it and running it. It felt like the Ohio guys had a field day picking off my passes. Each time they celebrated, it was like a punch to the gut. But it didn't stop with just 2 interceptions. The interceptions continued to pile up as the field got harder and harder to see. It was a borderline whiteout. That game was a wake-up call. It made me realize that I couldn't just coast through being the backup QB. I had to step up and take my role seriously. From that moment on, I poured my heart and soul into being the best quarterback I could be. It wasn't going to be easy, but I was ready to put in the work, both on and off the field. That snow game was just the beginning of my journey to reclaim my position and prove that I had what it takes to lead a team to victory. Justin Marshall was balling for sure, getting himself a touchdown catch, but when I tried to make the game closer in the fourth quarter, I hit Booby Curry right in the hands over the top and he dropped it. The very next play, my 5th interception. I was surprised Coach didn't pull me, but I think he was in shock at this point. We had fallen so far as a team this season, from the high of beating Ohio State to the low of losing to Ohio and throwing 5 interceptions in the process. We ended up losing the game 24-6, and unsurprisingly, I ended up getting benched for the remainder of the season. Our final record ended up being 5-7, and Coach told me that he wanted to give me a heads up that I should transfer because he was getting a quarterback in the transfer portal to fill Cole Snyder and I's spots at quarterback. I decided to go back to Seattle early in March to think it over. In the offseason and during the transfer portal, I started working at a waste removal company to make some extra money since I didn't have any NIL deals. I ended up slipping between 2 stairs and badly injuring my ankle, almost fracturing it. I was feeling sorry for myself. I started to gain weight, going from 185 pounds up to 215 pounds, and not the good kind of weight. Eventually, my family helped me pull out of that depression, and I started volunteering. I started to worry less about childish things like my self-image and the popularity of myself, and I wanted to become a leader. I wanted people to trust me, and I wanted to help them achieve their dreams, unlike what happened in Buffalo. Although I will say that Jamari Gassett, my wide receiver, and Aljae Henderson, my running back, did end up making the NFL. Gassett got drafted in the 4th round, and Aljae got drafted in the early 3rd. I started doing private workouts for a few college teams. During the offseason, I continued to work on my throwing and my decision making. I had to focus on that a bit more because my ankle injury was still lingering. Louisville had offered me to become a walk-on before I went to Buffalo, so it wasn't too crazy that they'd still be interested in me as a backup quarterback. They just came off of a season where they were ranked in the top 25 to finish the season, and I started out as the 2nd string quarterback, and I started to work like crazy during practice and film study so that I could take the starting job. In preseason, we were ranked in the top 25, with the quarterback position still up for grabs. The talent on the team was insane. Jawar Jordan was a great one-cut back, Tyler Hudson and D. Wiggins were 2 senior wideouts who excelled at route running and jump balls, and Amari Huggins-Bruce was a huge deep threat, and then Marshawn Ford was the X-factor of this team offensively at tight end. After Doman ended up getting mono before the season opener, I was put in the starting lineup. Now, I just had to stay there this time. Our first game of the season came against Marshall. So far in my career, I was 1-2, so I couldn't take any team lightly, and we had bowl game aspirations. The sophomore Huggins-Bruce was outstanding in the first game of the season, playing like Tyreek Hill. Despite easily working our way down the field multiple times on offense, we were down 9-14 to start the 4th quarter, settling for 3 field goals in the red zone. I don't know if it was all the practice or just having better receivers, but I was throwing absolute dots to my new offensive weapons. We scored another field goal, and we were still down 12-14 with a minute left. We had the ball, and we were already in field goal range, so coach just had us run the ball to burn time. Finally, Jawar Jordan got into the end zone for a touchdown, securing us an 18-14 lead and eventually getting us our first W of the season. Our next game came against Kentucky. The winner gets the right to the Governor's Cup each year, and in our previous season when I was at Buffalo, we lost to Kentucky, so it was time to bring that cup back to Louisville. I'll be honest, this was probably my best college or high school game ever. I had never made these kinds of throws before. I always lacked the throwing power and the arm talent overall to hit my targets deep down the field, but I was spreading it out to all of my receiving threats. Hudson and Wiggins were doing well, and Marshawn Ford was already making some insane catches over defenders. Not only was I throwing it well, but I was scrambling a little bit despite the nagging ankle injury. I still had a brace on my ankle that limited my mobility, and my athletic training staff told me that I had a set limit on the amount of times I could go full speed scrambling outside of the pocket for now. I'll be honest, the way we were playing offensively, Kentucky didn't have a prayer to begin with, but on top of that, the D locked down Kentucky's offense and forced some turnovers. Speaking of turnovers, I didn't have a single turnover in my first 2 games for Louisville, which was definitely different from when I was at Buffalo. I really think this offense suits me as a dual threat quarterback, and I have to admit I probably wasn't ready for a full-on pro-style offense that primarily relied on my arm talent. The offseason reps will really pay dividends, though. I felt like I unlocked new throwing angles and bigger windows for my receivers. In the end, we took the win 27-10, and we'll see what the rest of my sophomore year has in store in the next next episode.